Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. I'm here today with Nicolas Bertagnolli, the co-founder and CTO of mpathic. And today we're speaking about early stage startups. So welcome to the show, Nick. It's so great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. It's great to be here.
Yeah, definitely. And could you just go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Of course. So as you mentioned, my name's Nick. I've been a software engineer and machine learning practitioner for about a decade now. My background is in math and computer science. I've spent the majority of my career working on applying NLP and machine learning inside of the medical domain. I did a bunch of work trying to improve hospital care and performance by automatically analyzing clinical records, and later shifted to working on kind of psychotherapy type problems. I really enjoy merging deep domain expertise with automation and machine learning in fields that have the potential to improve people's lives. That's why recently I've started a company with a good friend of mine, and we've been trying to translate her years of experience as a clinical psychologist into kind of automated systems of empathy correction and training. It's kind of like Grammarly for empathy.
That's awesome. Very cool stuff that you're working on. And tell us more about your work specifically with NLP. How do you bridge NLP, machine learning, and mental health all together?
Awesome. That's a great question. I think the first step here is to work closely with a domain expert. In my experience, the funnest and most rewarding problems are combining technical expertise, someone's a software engineer or a data scientist, with someone who has a deep understanding in some other non-technical related field like medicine or psychotherapy. Here it's psychotherapy. So therapists spend most of their lives training to learn evidence-based interventions, which are actually based on protocols and rules that humans sometimes have difficulty following. Augmenting therapy with AI allows humans to perform even better because it provides them suggestions on how to be empathetic and adhere to these rules in real time. It's a great training tool. One thing that we've observed in the research and the literature is that kind of just like going to lectures and just like reading about how to be empathetic doesn't really work. It's really this kind of like practice and training thing. You have to continue to work at it and kind of grow this skill. So that's kind of why it's really hard to do this. It's really hard to scale training of this. It's really hard to kind of scale this practice because you need to have somebody who's kind of an expert to sit down and help you make corrections and understand, where you're doing the right thing and where you're doing the wrong thing. And that's why we're trying to scale this with AI and automation. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's awesome. All the work that you're doing right now with your team. And so your startup works to continue education credits for therapists specifically also. So can you talk more about how you're training these models based on empathic communication?
Happy to answer that. To build a model to support therapists or anyone to learn empathy, first you have to train it on good examples of empathy. And guess what most big AI models are trained on? It's kind of the worst parts of the internet, chat rooms, articles, just everything that's out there. You can think about Tay, Microsoft's kind of failed interactive Twitter bot, as an example. So our goal here is to curate one of the best data sets of empathy by working directly with therapists. So we built our models on empathy training games, which are on a different site called Empathy Rocks. And these games were designed by my colleague Grin, who is a clinical psychologist, and are meant to teach therapists how to express empathy and then label data. It's almost like Duolingo. So you can think about it like therapists need these continuing education credits to keep their licenses. And the way they normally get these is by going to lots of lectures. But we know that lectures don't work in actually changing people's behavior and helping them to improve. So we've created this interactive game system so that we can feed data that we want labeled and corrected directly to therapists. Therapists can play games that teach them these skills in real time and help them practice. While they're playing these games, they'll actually be labeling data for us that we can then use to train our models. So we can kind of start with these deep transformer models that are trained on the entire internet and don't have any oversight, and then really refine them by training them directly with therapists.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I'm sure that all of the work that you're doing also with these therapists, there are some challenges that must come with this. So what are some challenges that you've seen in this line of work that you do?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So one of the biggest challenges to this problem is making sure that the corrections that you serve are good. For example, if you're training somebody and you're kind of trying to automate this process and you want to provide good corrections and train someone well, but that correction system is automatic and doesn't really have human oversight, like how are you sure that it's not going to provide a bad correction or teach someone to do something that's not correct? And I think this is kind of a really big open problem that a lot of people are working on. I know that OpenAI is particularly concerned about this. On our end, kind of the way that we're approaching this is instead of trying to kind of solve this problem in general, like, hey, I don't ever want my model to say something bad across like any type of speech. We're trying to look at like very hyper specific types of interactions so that we can be more sure that like in this one example where we're training this one skill, we know that the responses are good. And I think other problems in this space too, besides just the checking to make sure that your automatic responses or corrections are good or correct or not harmful, comes down to just data access. So anytime that you're working in the medical domain, the therapy domain, anything where there's kind of protected health information and you really have to be careful about privacy, it's extremely hard to get data, and it probably should be, because like if you go talk to your therapist, you're telling them your deepest secrets and your problems and things that you really don't want everybody to know about and are very personal. So it's kind of it's hard for us as machine learning practitioners and data scientists to get access to this type of data that could have really beneficial societal impact if we could run models on it and if we had more of it. So I think that's kind of another problem is how can we get access to more kind of sensitive data or find ways to get data that is a surrogate for that type of sensitive data.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a common answer I've heard throughout just talking to a lot of people on this podcast is being able to get that data and making sure that it's quality data, it's the correct data that you need to work with. So definitely super interesting to hear it, that it's a common issue amongst all different fields really right now. Yeah.
You got to have data. You got to find the data.
Yeah, definitely. And how do you make these language models behave more like nice humans and an empathic human?
Another very good question. So the metaphor that I like to use for our company is we're kind of like the font to text. So it just adds a little bit of flavor to it. Everyone has AI. Everyone can use GPT-3. But do they have emotion? Do they have kind of some of these key characteristics of human empathy? And the answer to how we do this is by really leaning heavily into the domain expert, right? Like is that we've kind of taken years of research on human behavior and interaction, and kind of drilled this down to the words and word phrases that predict objective ratings of empathy, and we combine those learnings into the training of our models. I think maybe the best way to kind of do this is to just walk through an example. So to just give you kind of a taste, think about the act of giving someone feedback. So oftentimes, if you want to give someone advice or feedback, you'll kind of just come out and say it, like, hey, you should go to the gym, or like, you should do this thing, or if it were me, I would blah, blah, blah. And like, that's simple and it's easy, but it often leaves other people feeling unheard. And I don't know, I'm sure in your day-to-day, in my day-to-day, like people often provide advice in this way. And that's pretty easy to detect. It's just like straight up giving someone advice. There's a lot of like linguistic signals about advice giving. But you can do some very simple transformations on this to make it much more empathetic. So for example, instead of saying something like, you should go to the gym, it'd be like, well, what are your thoughts about the gym? You could kind of turn it into this like open interaction about the gym. Or you could say like, I have some thoughts about that. Would you like to hear them? So another way you could do it is kind of opening it up to a discussion instead of just providing that advice straight away. And so there are kind of a lot of these really simple types of transformations on common human speech and interactions that we're trying to tune in on and identify, and then provide those corrections.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. How do you kind of envision your company growing in the next coming years?
So, well, we're in a really exciting moment right now. We're raising our seed funding for our company, so very, very small. We one day hope to be the folks that humanize AI to some extent and provide any style of communication with text. So almost like an emotional deepfake. You want to be more assertive, like we can come up with some linguistic rules and some corrections to provide to your text to help you do that. Or you want to be more dynamic or empathetic. We can do that. Like that's the hope, is that we can kind of be this like intermediate training layer, almost like Grammarly. You write something, it highlights it, and it says, hey, if you rephrased it like this, it would make it more assertive, or it would make it more empathetic, or it would make it more dynamic. That's the dream, but where we are right now is just focusing on empathy, because let's be honest, that's kind of what the world needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I wanted to ask is, do you or your company ever have to deal with different languages and having to analyze that with NLP? Because I've spoken to other people on the podcast, and they've always mentioned how that's also a major issue when working with NLP. So is that an issue that your company also has to kind of work with?
Yeah, this is another super big problem. As an English speaker, we're really, really fortunate in ways that I think that we don't normally realize, right? Like Siri on your phone uses there's just so much English training data and data available that the English models are much get really, really good. And yeah, we absolutely have issues with that. Like right now, kind of the way that we generate data is through these continuing education credits, and that's like a United States thing. So it would be harder to motivate therapists to do this in other countries to maybe use different languages. And right now, yeah, we're just focused on English, which is a super big bummer, because that's a tiny fraction of the language, of all the languages on earth, that's just one of them. Yes, so getting other language data is also hard. It's something that we hope to address, but right now we're very limited.
Yeah, definitely. It's English is also a very difficult language to learn, so it's good to at least hear that it's closely worked with in NLP today. But it's awesome, all of the work that you're doing at your company, and I want to say thank you so much, Nick, for joining us today. It's so interesting to hear more about your background and the experiences that you're working on. And we at the Data Standard, we're trying to build a community where everyone can just come together and network with each other. So what is something that we could do for you?
Oh, well, it's been great being here. Thanks for having me. Well, when we're ready to scale, maybe I can reach out and get some engineers from you. But seriously, two things. If anybody wants to kind of come play the games that we've made at empathyrocks.com, try them out. So we're about to launch an app soon, which has a much better UI. I'm terrible at designing UIs, as you'll see if you ever go to the website. And give us feedback, kind of let us know if the games are engaging, if you learned anything, if those skills are useful to practice. And then the second thing, if you have any interesting data sets in kind of the psychotherapy or the human empathy domain that contribute to empathy, we'd love to do a collaboration with you. So we've tried to be proactive and kind of release some of the data that we've been using. Like as we've collected data that we think is useful, we've tried to make it open source, and in the hope to kind of help grow this community in this field. And so if you have data and you're willing to share, we would love to collaborate with you.
Yeah, awesome. And where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, so for the company, there's empathy.rocks. So we have www.empathy.rocks. It's a .rocks domain. And then we have another URL at www.mpathic, mpathic.ai. So those are kind of the two businesses. For me, you can find me on LinkedIn under my name. I'm also on Medium at Bertagnolli. So I do a little bit of technical writing. I think those are probably the best places to follow our work.
That's perfect. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as on our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show, and we hope to have you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine.